Hello, everybody. This is Justin, and we're here with the second episode of the Third Grade Awakening podcast. So I'm just going to quickly have everybody introduce themselves again.
This is David.
Nate's over here. Amar.
And Mr. Janicek.
So today, when we were thinking about what we were going to talk about, I was thinking about how the Super Bowl was just like 2 days ago from us recording this. And my family, my entire family, my parents and I, my grandpa even, we didn't watch it because we were boycotting it. And you might ask why? It's because veterans wanted to put up an ad during the Super Bowl saying, "Please stand," referring to the national anthem. And the NFL refused to show this ad, saying that they didn't want to get political. However, by openly letting their players like kneel or not even come out for the national anthem, the NFL has already shown that they are willing to be political. And this just really upset my family and I.
All right, here's what I have to say about it. Is it part of their contracts that they can't stand to it? I don't believe it is. All right, I've never heard about like any NFL player having it in part of their contracts that you must stand for the anthem.
No, it is not.
So they don't need to stand for the anthem. It's their full freedom. They have the full choice.
Yeah,
NFL can choose what to do, but it was not one of the rules when they signed up to be a football player to not stand for the anthem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you have a right to exercise your rights. I mean,
Or should we let businesses decide what to do with our rights?
But you're saying it's perfectly fine for the NFL to refuse to show something respecting the veterans of the country, people who have fought, died, been injured for this country. You think it's perfectly fine to show disrespect to them
It's not
in order to
exactly
give...
disrespect for the veterans.
well, I don't think it's right showing disrespect towards our veterans, but at the same time, it's an ad. It's meant to gain money.
No, but this was veterans trying to put up the ad, telling like people watching to stand for the anthem.
But the NFL is not required to at all, by any means, because they're private company of sorts. They are not required by any laws or anything that says they're required, that they're required to show that specific ad. If it was a actual government ad that was legally required, the government wins, I'd say. But since this was just private, between two private groups, NFL could refuse as much as it wants to. It has the full right to do it.
I'm not saying they don't have the right to do it, but the whole reason we were boycotting it is to show that we don't agree with that decision. I mean, yes, they have the right to do that, but this is a question of virtue. Like, they might be like by law they can do it, but is it the right thing to do?
Now you're getting into a better question. So let's iron out some of these facts. The NFL is 100% correct. There is no contract that these guys have to do that. So there is no legal obligation to do it. The NBA does have a legal obligation. It is in the overarching NBA contracts. So probably what the NFL is going to do is they're going to rewrite all of their contracts. Whether it's going to happen next year or the next, I don't know. But I haven't heard, but I know they're going to move toward that to make this hopefully a non-issue for them. They don't want to be divisive, and they don't want to be in politics. They don't like the NFL as a business, as an organization, doesn't like that this has turned political. And to try to like figure out a way out of it, if you had turned on the game, Justin, you would have seen that they're even knowing, they were a little empathetic with what your situation, your family's is, because if you watch, did anybody else watch it?
No.
The intro, the coin toss, was all about bringing the World War II veterans out, all Medal of Honor winners in the United States that wanted to come. I don't know if there's all that wanted to come, but they had at least 20 guys out on the center, out on midfield. And the guy that did the coin toss was an Iwo Jima veteran, Medal of Honor winner. How old you got to be in 2018 to be an Iwo Jima 1945 guy, but he's out there flipping that coin. And the NFL was trying to figure out a way, since they declined that ad, you're right, since they declined it, they were trying to figure out a soft pedal way to make it look like they were damage control. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So as a business, that's what they were working on, is their image, because they know it's tainted. They know it's tarnished. They know it's divisive. And I think ahead in the future, they're gonna try to minimize that at all from their business side, because they lost a lot of business this year. The NFL probably had its worst year as a league, which seems to be an easy moneymaker in this day and age, professional sports for these guys. But they really, because of the actions of the players, whether justified or unjustified, so we can talk about that later. And to what extent was the protest something that you'd like to support, or what does it reveal in our society, or what, or you don't, At the end of the day, the NFL lost revenue, and they want to try to figure out a way to eliminate that from the future. So it's a business decision on their end. So, yeah. What do you think, David?
Well, I mean, I couldn't tell if your question, like, not be offensive, I couldn't tell if it was more of a question on, like, whether the staying up for the pledge is your problem, like the fact that they're allowed to not do that, or the fact that the ad wasn't shown, or the fact that the veterans were supposedly disrespected. I feel like there's a lot of roads in your pathing there.
Okay, yes, I did kind of spring off into a web from the main concept. Probably, and it mainly is starting off with people not standing for the national anthem, which is my main problem.
So that's your main problem.
Yes.
So if the NFL thing never happened, you would ask that question, right? Like, I can remove the ad part, the veteran part, the business part, and that's really what you want to know. Like, I'm just wondering.
Yeah, I've been
Got it.
complaining about that for a while now.
Okay, so
Is it basically showing respect to veterans and the government versus showing how a protest towards?
Well, that's an interesting
Government.
question. What does the anthem, Justin, symbolize for you that you wish those guys would want to stand? What does it symbolize for you?
Well, to me, it symbolizes what unites all of us, and that is being Americans. It doesn't matter, like, where your ancestry is, what your religion is, the color of your skin. We're all Americans. And so I feel like it's a nice sense of unity, and to have people be not standing, disrespecting it, I just feel like they're kind of throwing away that unity that brings us together.
But say one of the most prevalent reasons for people not standing for it is just like with Colin Kaepernick, they were protesting against police brutality at times throughout America. In America, there's widespread police brutalities, even throughout the years. Like, you can even go back to the 1960s, for example. Extreme cases of police brutality through hosing down civilians for non-violent protesting. And that was non-discriminatory against anybody, except for people who were discriminating against them, against against racists who wouldn't allow colored people to sit in the same place as white people. I'd say they are trying to unite Americans, but they're through not actually standing. They're kneeling to unite Americans against police brutality.
that was one of the reasons for the previous instances of kneeling. I think
And
that's what, yeah.
I myself, I don't stand for the Pledge of Allegiance whenever the school does it, or for any of those things, because I see students around the country in news articles. I see students who are punished for that,
Right.
and if they're punished for that, I'm not going to do it. What I follow,
Yeah,
And what is that?
what I follow is that I find it unfair that people, and students particularly, are being punished for simply not standing for a pledge. And it itself even doesn't even follow what my faith is. I have no faith, yet there's the under God part. Yes, I could omit the under God part, but in the end, as long as anybody's been punished for it, even at any time. if a
I'm
person-
kind of curious to know about the punishment stuff that you've seen, because I haven't heard of that.
There was a
There was
You
one.
you don't have to look it
There
up.
was also
but-
one in remember one of them was in Texas.
There was a Supreme Court case where they made it legal.
Yeah.
You can sit down during the pledge.
Sure.
I don't.
But that's the thing, it's good to
But, yeah.
cross-reference that stuff, because we want to know what major starting points we're on when it comes to that. Justin?
I mean, I can understand, because the pledge, it does mention God. So I can see, and it is kind of forced upon you at a young age. So I can see why people do have a problem with that. And I know a lot of people are always saying, oh, America's the only country that has anything like that. But at the same time, it's just because America seems to have quite a strong spirit, I guess almost nationalistic, which I don't know, that has bad connotations nowadays, but
Is there any difference in your guys' minds between the Pledge of Allegiance and the national anthem? Or to you, are they all the same boat? Is it all the same thing?
To me, they both showed respect to the founders of our country, people who fought for our freedom. So to me, it just represents those ideals. If there are corrupt people holding government positions or being police officers that are showing brutality, like you were saying, Amar, I can understand why people would say, well, maybe I shouldn't stand up for the pledge. But they're not the people who made the pledge. The people who made the pledge
No.
did not.
I'm going to throw out something, probably better to get to the undercurrent here is, you're right. Have we had people in our government in the 60s, people were burning the flag because of Vietnam protests. So in the civil rights cases were the civil rights cases, and the Democratic Convention in Chicago led to violence by the police, over political matters and all that. The symbolic nature of the kneeling for the pledge or the burning of a flag or whatnot actually shouldn't be the focus of our discussion, right? Mm-hmm. The focus of any worthy discussion on these issues, it should probably be, why are the people doing that? Why are the people doing that? And in the context of because you're historically accurate. These things were a problem, and people were demonstrating that the symbolic nature of these things that Justin likes are tainted with historical reality, like what we want the idealistic to be. It's not that, Vietnam was your first big jump off, and the civil rights movement, your first big real national comprehension of that reality, right? And so there's an awareness that something needed to be corrected. And in the context of fast forwarding to the NFL stuff, are these guys kneeling for a legitimate reason? I would probably say yes, their heart's in the right place. But what do we look across the board? Are they aware of the kneelers themselves, of the path that this country's been on? And are they going to be open to dialogue on how to make it better?
I'd say Colin Kaepernick is.
Yeah, I don't know the whole story.
Yeah, I've read some articles and watched some videos,
Mm-hmm.
and the stuff he's saying, it's not like something like the average American would know.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like he really does his own research into what occurred, and he knows, with conviction, why what he's doing for and why.
Mm-hmm.
And also, getting back to what does the pledge and standing up to the flag or whatever national anthem. To me, that sort of stuff that saying you must do it. That
Yeah.
symbolizes totalitarianism to me.
Yeah.
It makes us think, oh, we have to do it. So we're not a free republic. We're a totalitarian government who wants to increase your nationalistic.
So we should actually maybe want to figure out a way to want to stand to honor the idealistic nature of our country. You wouldn't argue with that. We should want to. Mm-hmm. Our system should give us reason to want to make that choice. But yeah, I reluctantly sometimes look at the pledge, only because I know history too. And I know the pledge was written by Francis Bellamy in the late 1800s to symbolize an idea of unity that he wanted to make sure everyone was creating. And he was a socialist leader of the day. So I kind of look at it as the pledge hadn't been around forever. The anthem's been around a long time, but the pledge is more or less a new thing. And then when you get to the pledge, historically, Eisenhower's administration during the Cold War is the one that requested to add "under God" to the pledge, just so that Americans would sort of be aware that we never wanted to go communist, right? Like, you know, make sure God is gonna be part of this equation, in case anyone would forget. That was part of the Cold War heightened sense of ideological awareness that they wanted to make sure people were gonna be trained to grow up to make sure you know you don't wanna be communist, you know?
This reminds me of the quote: "When a fascism comes to America, it'll be in a cross wrapped around. It'll be a flag wrapped around the cross."
Now, yeah,
That's
okay.
like one of the.
Okay, but you understand that's equivalency of bomb throwing from the other side.
Yeah.
You can't, like Justin's saying, and he's alluded to this, to what extent is nationalism a good or bad thing, right? Because there's times where it gets overzealous, and there's times when it's probably, I hope we feel it. I hope we can feel a sense of unity, right?
Yeah, like again, my group members brought up 9/11.
Mhm.
And like, yeah, we talked about how it caused a sense of unity throughout Americans,
Mhm.
and like against a common goal, Al Qaeda.
Mhm.
But there were some of the bad things that came from it, such as increase in Islamophobia, and that was like one of the major things that we had to that was like one of the major cons of tragedies. Like they could cause fear in certain groups of people.
You're getting onto our discussion that we have all year long on defining balance and what the proper balance is, you know? So, and if you took that right back to what you guys started even this today with, what did you kind of started with, even while we were off air, you started with Black Lives Matter concepts, right? Like and then if I take the devil's advocate position and I'm gonna be a police officer in an urban setting where the majority of the citizens happen to be African American, right? By default, I'm gonna be racially profiling, even if I'm a black police officer. I mean, like there's circumstances of reality, and then there's circumstances where if it's under control, it's all up to the people that are executed to enforce these laws, right?
But like, what I'm thinking of is the idea of like, historically speaking,
Mhm.
the idea of a good police officer.
Mhm.
You know, someone who will always uphold the law, someone who won't go against the law and won't follow their moral code. Like those are technically considered good police officers. Would you say that they are?
Yeah, we said their moral code.
Their own moral code.
Yeah, but their own.
Yeah.
You just did something very different, though. Are you gonna tell me that every individual is allowed to define their moral code?
Not necessarily, but they should not allow the state to define what should be right and wrong. The state, such as what? So if we follow like history, segregation, all right, that was okay. Suddenly 180, nope. Like that doesn't really make much
No.
sense.
I agree. So, and when you're talking about the past to present, it's very important to make sure you know, because obviously there's no state that has segregation anymore. Obviously, we've made progress in that context. So when we're talking about segregation of the past, it's kind of unfair to lay the exact issues that were in the 1960s and say they're still the same issues of today without ignoring the other ignoring the other complexities, because that's just so when you're talking about things within context, and this is the part that becomes confusing for a lot of American students and a lot of American adults. Things are taken out of context, you know? And how do we get that discussion back to a better place? I don't think it's about the kneeling or the not kneeling. I don't think it's about the standing for the pledge. I don't think it's about any of that. It's let's steer that conversation. What is causing the division in the first place? And if we get right down to it, you're right. Maybe it's unkept promises. You said something before about idealistic. Ideally, this is what we want.
Mhm.
You want your government to be a government you want to stand up for.
Mhm.
You want your citizenry to sort of adhere to certain norms, if you will, or principles. Tolerance might be one of those principles, right?
Well,
Should we tolerate the intolerant, though? That's another question.
That's a great threshold to talk about. Now you're talking about something better. You know what I mean? You guys are getting into deeper elements, you know? And frankly, legally, the First Amendment protects all kinds of speech, even hate speech, as long as you aren't getting violent on somebody, you know, or advocating violence towards somebody, you know? So, but that's a messy situation. Like, you're gonna offend people in a society where you tolerate free speech of all kinds. And is that okay? You know, I would argue, yes, it's actually totally necessary to defend everyone's right to say whatever they want, as long as they're not advocating violence on a group, you know? But you should be able to say whatever it is you want to say and give people the choice to listen or not listen. But that's where I would start. Yeah, Dave?
I was gonna say that, like, in my personal opinion, which is kind of weird, but like, it's all based on like individual, which is kind of hard because if you want an ideal, like if you're talking like, I want a country I can ideally, you know, pledge, salute, all that for, right? But that's very dependent on what you see the country as. Obviously, I'm gonna use just an example. You might believe that we're in a good state, right? We're in a good state of whether it's anything from economy to government to social, anything. And then somebody else, say Amar, can come in and be like, nah, America is super corrupt right now. I can't believe we need like a revolution. Like,
You could get business out of politics.
like it's all based on individual. Because Justin, what he sees, I'm not saying he does see this, but he might be seeing one of the greatest phases of America of all time, and what Amar sees might be one of the worst American phases of all time. And that is going to affect how each one thinks of each other and what each one's going to do when that pledge is being played over the intercom, right? And in the same sense, if you have that free speech as well, or the freedom of religion and whatnot, coming with the First Amendment, you're going to get different people with different opinions and views of America judging you. If we talk we want to talk historical example, we can just go to the late 1900s with Muhammad Ali being a conscious objector to the Vietnam War, because it went against, in his opinion, in his view, it went against his religion. But to others, other Americans during the time, they thought he was being un-American, unpatriotic. You know, he's not he wants us to lose, things like that. That's going to be what causes those judgments, their own personal views, their own personal ways they see things. And what's that lead? That led to Muhammad Ali being jailed for quite some time, a little bit, stopped his career, whatnot. Sorry, and I mean, like, at what point do you have to say like who's right and who's wrong in those scenarios?
Yeah.
That's what's really gonna get people is
Well,
that there's no absolute law or something that you can fall back on, right? Like, as you said as well, is that if there's police officers, at what point is their moral code gonna be more right than the law? And at what point is the law gonna be more right than their moral code? I mean,
You know,
you don't know what's right. Like,
Yeah, you know, and I think we're not gonna define all those characteristics today, and I think I'd like to figure out what those are in more of our podcasts, is to figure out what are some of those American norms that we would all find consensus with, of all groups, of all, you know. And, you know, I don't think the answers are all that far away. I mean, I really think they're pretty much in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. I mean, I think a lot of the major premises are really there already. We would just probably be better served if we followed them a little bit more vigorously and knew them very well, you know, what they all were and what they all are. Because probably if more Americans were aware of that, we might not have had the extent of which we have a Patriot Act, like, you know, like, you would, but Americans aren't generally aware of the levels in their own history. We're just not generally aware. So if we can figure out what that balance is and what are common things that we could all agree to,
You can stop the skillful terrorist
you could.
prisoners.
You could, but then you'd have to have concessions, right, by both sides. You would have to have Republicans or conservatives would have to, you know, adhere to some sort of element of our national character is compassionate. And you would probably have to have Democrats or liberal-minded people who would have to concede that somewhere along the line, there's got to be a level of personal responsibility attached to this, you know?
Like, he's saying moral code, he's saying what's wrong, what's right. I was saying image earlier, and in order to get everybody on the same page, I mean, America is a very opinionated nation. So everybody's gonna have their different opinions based on their background, where they go to school, all these different things combined together, and what you're saying, looking at the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, and looking at those more closely and more strictly, and coming together to make progress, that may be more beneficial instead of targeting each other and saying,
Well, yeah, and you guys were
what's wrong,
exposed,
what's right.
yeah, you were exposed to Zinn too,
Mhm.
about that skillful terracing. And the two divisions that kept people from being able to unite, as we're talking about unity,
Race and nationality.
is race and national, or nativism, as he said it specifically, but, you know, that, and now, does that mean, like a Theodore Roosevelt quote that I was gonna get into with you guys eventually here, says, there is no room in this country for hyphenated Americanism, you know? So you're not supposed to be, you know, a Polish American or an Irish American or an Italian American or an African American or, you know, you're just not, he wants people to mentally start thinking like a unity one, right? But what does that then look like? Like Roosevelt's answer would be very clear. You have to do this, 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 and this, right? Like, and they were clearer then. Now we're just not as clear with what those principles are. But do you think, I don't know, do you think that race identification, cultural identification, gender identification, people identifying themselves via their group, does that do us more of a service? Or does it do us more of a disservice?
So it's like, I personally think that it's like more of a situational thing. Like, should we allow it to like affect every single decision that we make? No, but we should remember what those groups had to go through, what sort of what sort of tragedies that they had to go through to finally become on sort of an equal level.
So what do we do once we remember? You know, I don't think you're gonna convince any Republican or any more conservative, traditionally minded person that slavery didn't happen. You're not gonna, you know, it happened. We know it happened, and we know it had long-standing effects, and it created a class and culture of poverty for a long time that was really hard to get out of. But what now? You know, like, what are we supposed to do now when in theory the playing field is more level, right? Are there still problems with economic segregation? Sure. Now you gotta ask, to what extent is that self-imposed, or is there mobility up the economic ladder? And if somebody doesn't climb that ladder, then what are you supposed to do? Are you supposed to do more, or do you do less? Like, what's gonna help people? Doing more for them, or doing less for them? Or where is probably the middle part, you know?
I'm like very like naturalist. Like in our class, we have to do like, you know, we have to do a scale of like 1 to 5, like 5 being very and 1 being not really at all. Like I said I'm a 4 because of the situation at the time. It's like the situations that are the current systems that are in place. It's pretty much for the most part. A lot of the time, you can't really get out of poverty. You can't really get off the cold grip of poverty. It's just claws down on you. It's just clawing you down, bringing you back to its level. You can't really rise up to become like 1%. Why do we still have a 1% then? Why is there even a 1% in the first place if you can get to the top? Even through hard work. Millions of people work hard throughout their lives, yet they don't reach the top percent. That's like, and I don't like that. I personally don't like that, but I'd say it's a truth of our time.
So, total fairness, total unfairness, and what's acceptably fair, right? Like, you want some sort of,
Almost at times maybe a guarantee of sorts, not all the time, all right?
yeah,
You know, like, you're not gonna be guaranteed to become a billionaire,
Yeah.
but, you know, you're guaranteed like food, water, you know, everybody I believe should be guaranteed those things. A decent shelter for yourself, you know, if you wanna have a family and things like that.
to what extent do you need, and I'll let you guys discuss that, but to what extent does the individual involved need to be responsible for those things too? You said entitled to X, Y, and Z. More or less, we have the systems in place that do provide those things. We do have Social Security, meaning we do have unemployment compensation. We do have layers of protections are those layers of protections encouraging what the ideal that you want to see, or are they discouraging, or, it comes back to that again, and you're talking about Social Security, and then you're talking about the Great Society programs that Lyndon Johnson put in place to try to help, to try to address the conditions of poverty. And then we just need to see, we need to evaluate after that, how effective were these decisions, and what can we learn from those programs, good or bad, that were, that we have from those, and maybe make decisions to the future, I don't know.
I remember in Finland at least, I remember in Finland at least that they tried to have universal income, and it was a success. All right, people were, like artists in particular, were motivated to actually like do their art. They weren't bogged down at times by the having to have a job they can't like focus on what they want to do. They don't have enough time
Okay.
to focus on their
Okay,
Well,
but first
no,
of
no,
all, we're the
exactly.
United States, first of all, let's
I'm
go
just
there.
giving an example.
I know, but when you compare European and Western European tendencies and layer them onto the United States, you already know, and I know, that they have over a 50% tax rate in their countries, more or less holistically. We don't. I don't know that I want to have that, but that's a different argument and a different debate. But it's like comparing, when people say European and they pick Scandinavian countries to focus on, which are more socialistic, they're also ethnocentric too. They don't have the cultural diversity issues that we do. They don't have multicultural societies like we do. And they don't have the histories that we do, So it's like, it's comparing ladders and
Ladders and
fruitcakes.
like
Yeah.
ladders and shoots.
Yes,
Shoots
yes.
and ladders.
What do you think, David?
Actually, I'm gonna let Nate.
Oh, Nate, no,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Right.
Yeah, you were saying motivation. I feel that putting those, what's the word? I can't think of it. Putting those things in.
Opportunities?
Yes, putting those opportunities out there for the people, it's lost that certain motivation for them to work up. And some people already have that head start. So I feel like, almost like big business has kind of found a way around the whole monopolizing and maybe are rewording it. I mean, you can see now there's billionaires. Amazon is like one of the biggest. I mean, they're not getting rid of their competitors, but they're still growing, and they have a head start compared to everybody else. And you're saying you want fairness, but in the society that we have, it's going to be even harder.
We'll have to
Well, yeah, you gotta also define this fairness thing. I mean, I'm not advocating for a national salary of everyone in the country to be the same. I don't want stuff like this. To me, that's extreme. But what's relatively fair? We do have a minimum wage. You can argue if it's livable or not. We can argue for an increased one if we want, and the merits and the detractors from that. But when do you discuss what the opportunities actually are, what people should or could do to take advantage of those opportunities, and then to what extent do we need to maintain ladders of government programs to help people, and to what extent are people that are going to take advantage of those programs, to what extent do they need to be held personally responsible for their own decisions?
Well, I mean,
I'm just thinking basic homing, basic housing. That's like, sorry, at most, just basic housing,
We did try that.
Yeah.
In the War on Poverty, we had HUD, Housing and Urban Development. We built projects for poor, low-income people in the city. And unfortunately, they turned into cesspools of gang violence. And the conditions of poverty simply moved from a neighborhood into one building, and nothing changed there, despite the fact that the federal government subsidized housing. So now those places have been deemed a failure. They've pulled most of them down. And we're at status quo. We're like at what to do about that now, So David, I'll let you talk, yeah.
yeah, I just meant to say, I was thinking the whole time was like one rotten apple doesn't, kill the bunch. Like, obviously, if you let's say you give opportunities, whether that be education, monetary, all those. If that's all they have, and so people are grateful for that, and they obviously use it to work their way up to a normal job, good family, good house, as basic necessity of life are usually, then you wouldn't want them to have those opportunities removed. Like, they wouldn't want those opportunities removed, because obviously that's how their life has been improved by. But if you compare that to obviously like the gang members or people who are unable to use that, and you just say like, oh, everybody's just a lazy American, they ain't gonna use opportunities, and then you take those opportunities away, then those people who would have used them and would have been grateful for them, all of a sudden you're putting them with, like the others, and that's the problem, is that you can't really like make an absolute
Right.
tier of that, because there's always gonna be like the people who don't do anything. There's always people who do everything they can to keep it, and as you said, like the balance, that's the hardest. But I'm gonna actually ask Justin about that, because I feel like Justin would have a pretty good opinion on this, because in comparison to what obviously the people here in this group, maybe aside from like some people like Jermel, for example, he's gonna have a much more different opinion on this than you. Yeah, I just want to see.
Absolutely. So, I mean, what I think is, I definitely think we should have all these programs in place, definitely give everyone the same opportunity, but then what I think is, the problem is, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's something my mom's always been telling me. Self-fulfilling prophecies. If you say something, that's going to happen. And a lot of people, they hear, like, oh, poverty is, as you were saying, like, oh, it's a big gripping force, you can't escape it. Some people will take that and they'll use that as a motivator, like, oh, I'm gonna overcome this. But other people are like, yeah, I can't get out of my situation. And it's those people that say, oh, I can't get out of poverty, that they're just gonna exploit these systems, and then that's gonna be the whole reason why some people want to get rid of them, is because people that just don't even bother trying ruin it for everyone else.
Well, I was telling Amar earlier when David was talking, sorry, but it's one thing giving someone something versus them doing it themselves. I'm sure that there's a famous Karl Marx quote.
No, there's a famous Jesus quote on that. Give a man a fish, feed him for a day. Teach a man how
it
to
wasn't
fish,
Karl Marx. Yeah.
feed him for a lifetime.
Mhm.
So you can, and this goes into education, right? It's right there. We can teach people how to access power. But if they don't want to listen or won't read their assignments, what am I supposed to do? What can the system do to the non-participants that we see growing in our culture? Growing.
The apathetic.
Yes.
Should we do what
Right.
China does?
But that number, guys, is growing. It's not diminishing. It's elevating. Now, we're here and working our keisters off in a pretty decent school, trying to make people see these realities. But they're still not doing stuff. Not everybody, don't get me wrong, but enough people aren't, that it is becoming a concern for lots of us in the teaching profession and the school administrators is, what are we gonna do about this? Because if people aren't taking advantage, if people are graduating high school and can't write a paper, or don't know how to read a complex text, and we send them off to the next level, and the dropout rate's 56% at the college level, clearly something's not right here,
Well, you have to consider other things besides just a lack of effort. Maybe they don't have enough money, and that's why they had to drop
For
out.
high school?
For college.
But I'm talking high school now. I'm talking if people aren't going to take advantage of even this opportunity, should I be forced to make college a part of their entitlement process too?
Well, there's the question of should teachers feel guilty for that? Because there's always the argument, like they chose that route. Like they're the ones who chose not to do X assignment or fail X class. That's usually the student's supposed choice. But then you have maybe teachers taking the blame or the guilt, like, oh, this teacher didn't teach me the right way. He didn't teach me enough. He or she, like, didn't know how to teach. Like it's not my fault. It's theirs. And in the same sense, if you're looking at, in a general sense, if some high school has an incredibly high dropout rate, you might start blaming it on more the school and the teachers. Then more so you might be blaming on maybe the attitude of the students who do attend there, or maybe their background, whatnot. So it's also got to be like whether or not morally should you do something, or should you teachers do something, versus should we be doing something.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a great question. We are asked a lot more these days to teach you guys values and almost supplement the parental role, you know, especially at the elementary school level, they're trying to teach kids how to behave first and foremost. What are normal behaviors? You know, should you be in second and first grade talking back to the teacher? You know, that is becoming more common. I've asked my colleagues that work at elementary schools. That's just becoming more common.
I feel bad for them. They have to work at elementary schools.
Yeah. So like, it requires a values discussion eventually, and those are just hard to have. You know, that's why we're doing our club. You know,
Yeah.
to investigate some of these issues in the way that we're doing it. I think it's great. You know.
Well, you were talking about the decreasing effort in high school and dropout rates in college. I'm not gonna lie, I experienced this myself. I have a lack of motivation, and there's more distractions in the world than ever. I'm not gonna only blame it on that, it's my fault too.
Mm-hmm.
But there's more short-term pleasure,
Yes.
long-term pain, than instead of, what's the quote? There's more pleasure from looking at a phone than learning,
Yes.
than reading a book. No, I haven't,
Depends on the book.
I can't even read books anymore. I'm busy working at school, and then I'm going home for the weekends. I have to go somewhere, or I play a video game, and I get short-term pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, in the long run, that just decreases my odds.
Well, it does, but your own awareness of this right now is like better than most of your peers.
Well,
That you're able to talk about it and you recognize this, you know.
Well, here,
Yeah.
let me ask Justin about this. It's good because you're a fellow person who been in the Magna program, AP honors student. You know all that rigor, all the hard work, all that high intelligent sort of crap. But you're also much better than me at technology. You're highly in depth at it, and you're also a fellow gamer, enthusiast of the internet and whatnot. And also you have like quite the social life as well, right? So what do you think what differentiates you with all your academic effort, but being able to balance all that versus somebody who obviously might get distracted easily, might care a little, not even a little, about things like APUSH or any class? Like what differentiates you? Like why do you have that drive with all that stuff and some people don't? Like why is that?
Well, what it is as you said, it's a balance. But with this, it's more of it's a personal balance. Everyone needs to kind of find their personal balance, but not just with pleasure over pain, but also with like benefit over, I guess, stagnation. Because I used to, a year ago, I was like stressing so much over schoolwork, over everything I had to do, to a point where it was bad for my health. So in that situation, I allowed myself to do a few more, like play more video games, like distract myself more, but at the same time I have to then go, so on the balancing scale of pleasure over pain, I had to tip that a bit more towards pleasure. But if I went too far, then I have another balance, I'm not getting as much out of school anymore, so then I have to go back and think about really like getting my work done and whatnot. So it's just really a complex system of balances that really, it's different for every single person.
Internally motivated, or were you having help by your folks and or your family members and their surroundings that provided the peer pressure for you to have this proper balance that you think? Like, is this something that can be solely owned by only the individuals involved, meaning just all of us as individuals? Or is it something that your external environment will help you prioritize?
It's definitely a thing that you'll get support from your external environment. And one of the good things about this more, I guess, liberal way of life and like viewpoints, one of the good things about it is that it does allow for you to get these external motivations, which much like welfare and the other things you're talking about, it gives you the opportunity. It's just, again, some people abuse it. Like some people, if someone's going around saying, oh, depression is a serious issue, some people will take that, they'll try to balance, but other people just take the easy way out. Then they're like, yeah, it's an issue, I have that, and then they just spend their entire life trying to, like, playing video games, and they don't do any of their work.
If it's medically diagnosed or self-diagnosed, that's a big difference though. Because if it's self-diagnosed, yeah, I'd just be like, I don't believe you, all right? I don't believe you. Go do what you have to do.
That's just not what I'm saying necessarily. More that in today's society, people are more aware of that, which the good thing about that is now, if you self-diagnose or not, if you feel depressed, more people are willing to understand that and help you along. But the thing is, you have to, even if you're depressed, even whatever, you still have to keep working. You still have to keep going forwards. You can't just stop at that.
But
Well, then the-
depression stops that. Depression, like, you
No,
can't, like,
in the same sense, then you could argue that the people helping would be, I won't say a negative factor, but if you're left to deal on your own, if you want to talk Theodore Roosevelt, you want to talk any person during the 1600s, such as, like if your whole family dies and you're left on your own, and you work to self-improve, you work to become the best of what you can, and you could argue that in contrast, that you have people helping you out, you have people holding your hand, whatnot, that you might be more limited because you might feel like you're already there. You might feel like, like, why would I try to improve myself when I'm already the best? Look at all the people I got, look at all the things I have, all the gifts I've received. And it's hard, like, is it external, internal? I think it's more both, personally,
Yeah.
because
I
obviously.
think
yeah.
you're right.
Yeah.
You're back to the balance again. Now, can the government, can the state, can the education system as a school, can we do anything to supplement the absence of the home? That's another question, because short answer is no. We cannot replace parents. We cannot do that. So when we become the default teacher of values that some students may enter from a disadvantaged home situation, and they come to school with no center, there's no balance in their lives, perhaps, because they don't see an external force at home helping provide that. We have to try to do that, but each teacher here at the high school level only sees one student for 46 minutes a day. And quite frankly, some teachers have varying degrees of that value structure in themselves, right? So which one is the kid or the student supposed to cling to? Or it becomes much more complicated when the school system is having to bridge the gap due to an absence in a lot of homes of guidance that's worthwhile. Now, that worthwhile, we could debate all that, but I think we could probably all agree that if the screen is used as a babysitter, that's poor parenting, So, but and I know that is an awful lot of what's happening in a lot of American homes. The screen, the iPad, the digital age is creating a culture of ease, and a lot of parents are simply using that as a way to sort of occupy their children's time, as opposed to engage with the children's time, because the parents themselves often are engaged in that activity. So how do you fix that? Or does it need fixing? Or,
I mean, limiting it would help. I'm sure when you were growing up,
Atari, we had Atari,
Oh.
2600,
I have
Space Invaders.
I have an Atari
I was
too.
gonna-
It's amazing. I love it.
Yeah,
but when you were growing up, I'm sure if you were playing video games or something
Yes.
like that, that wasn't the biggest thing.
right,
You'd want to go play outside.
yes.
You'd want to, and you wouldn't be allowed to go outside unless you finish your homework, right?
Yeah,
Or-
more or less, yeah.
So try and do all your homework, and your motivation would be you go outside and live, absorb,
Absorb,
have
yeah,
fun.
yeah. Look at the sky, look
But-
at the tree, yeah.
Now you can have the phone all the time.
Mhm.
You can do whatever you want
Sleep
all the
with
time.
it.
Yeah, there are people sleeping
What
with their
percentage,
phones.
out of curiosity, this is straight up curiosity out of your teachers, I just want to know what percentage of your student body do you think actually sleeps in their room
Oh
with
my
their
God,
phone?
I know so many
Do you think
kids
it's-
that
do you think
are
it's
up
the
till like
vast
4 in the
majority?
morning. Yes,
I'm not gonna lie, my phone's always right on my bedside table.
my phone is
I have
on
an
the
alarm,
floor
so
next to my
that's why
bed.
it's even near me.
Yeah, I'm just curious, because my suspicion would say that it's like 80% of the kids sleep with their phone and are up too late, but that's just my
I mean,
Anecdotal intake.
But
But not Jeremy.
then you have to talk about
not
how, like,
Jermel, no.
then you have to talk about like the 3% who do that and still end up as great people. Obviously, because it's not like you can argue that at any given time, any technology is always going to be for the worse or the better if limited, right?
Yes.
Because some people build themselves out there. Like I personally think of myself as one of those people, right? Like I told you just last weekend, I built a PC for the first time.
Nice.
Which is pretty hard to do.
pretty hard.
And it's a pretty expensive process, but nonetheless, like that's what drives me. It's not like I sit there and I build
Right.
that and I'm like,
Right.
well, if I'm gonna waste all my time, go on my phone, all that crap, and then I, don't do my homework, whatever. It's just about that. It's just about being self-capable and self-aware at the same time to be I'm not gonna criticize myself for doing such a thing, but at the same
Right.
time, I'm not gonna praise myself. Well, not praise, but I'm not gonna send it.
I'll take care of that. Nice job. I'm really proud of you for
Yeah,
building
it's
that
like stuff
computer.
like that,
Well, but can you extrapolate that across what you see in your school, for since you know it? Are most people obviously doing that? Answer, no. Most people are not using their time in that capacity, but who am I to tell them how to use their time? I just don't want them, if they're not gonna use their time and their choices in a way to become a little bit more educated and move their own needle, I don't want them to come ask me for things later.
Well, there's interpretations too, because if all that I extracted from you were to say like the speeches or rants or whatever about technology, and I'm a person who uses the phone all the time,
Right.
if I were one of those people, I might end up being like, oh, the phone's bad, and I'm gonna like throw away it. I'm just gonna never come back to it. That's like an extreme.
Yep.
That's like I think it has to be more explained on a balance, but if you don't know what that balance is because this whole time you've been living on one side or the other, then
that's great.
how you can get there? Like
Yeah.
all you know is go over here, go over here. If you're a pendulum, it's like how are you gonna know how to lay in the middle? Like it's pretty much
Yeah.
impossible.
Stuff like this, conversations like this, that you get to have all the time, don't you guys? You guys have conversations like this all the time in your classes and in your.
I mean,
Once a week, I think.
that depends. Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna
Maybe
let
at
you guys
lunch.
carry on.
Alright,
I'm too busy as a student aide.
alright. I'm gonna ask Justin about this. This fellow technologist, how you feel about this?
I really love when you said the words self-awareness. That just really stood out to me. I loved that because that's a thing that can vary for the individual. Like some people say like, oh, technology is bad, you have to use less of it. And other people are like, technology is the future, use more. But it really depends on who you are. Some people use technology, they use it too much, and it's not benefiting them in any way. They're on Snapchat, they're sending, I'm not saying it's bad to socialize, but they're sending like pointless messages, gossip and stuff to their friends.
And sometimes technology is life-saving.
Yeah.
Like the iron lung. The iron lung.
Or not even in that
Yeah.
case, even in like,
medically, like.
But
or even in like Bill
an
Gates'
example
case,
of
his life.
there's more photos taken today than there are in the entire 19th and 20th century.
But is that
I mean, there
progress?
are more photos taken today throughout the globe.
But
Around the globe. I may be wrong.
Nate,
I'm giving
no,
the doubt.
it is a slightly true statement. That is true. But the question is like, whether is that progress or is that just obvious? Obviously, if everybody has a phone nowadays, everybody has a camera, then there's gonna be more pictures taken. That's a fact. But in what sense is
What I'm
that?
trying to say is,
Yeah, like when the camera was like $1. Like, the camera became $1 in like the 1800s.
It's-
Like in like the 18 or 1900s, like a camera became like $1, a handheld camera you could bring around with you, like in a box like this big. Think.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely progress in the fact that we can do it, but is it progress in how we use it? Not necessarily, because a lot of
well,
people.
I wasn't trying, sorry to interrupt.
No, it's fine.
But I'm not trying to say it's progress. I'm just saying the internet and everything we look at is always expanding and it'll never stop, ever, ever. And you want to get that pleasure from it. You lose your time. Where were we?
The internet expanding, as you said.
Internet is expanding, you lose time. And your only motivation is to check, to update yourself with the world. I mean, imagine it
But what if you use the internet?
where
to do
you
that?
would get information on Trump from the paper.
The paper, what's the paper?
Right, but like, what use
The
internet to do that,
newspaper.
right? Are you losing time then if you are using the internet to do that? If
I
to
mean-
people,
I mean,
if that
think
is
about
their
it.
news
I say
source?
there's some, it depends on where you go in, you know, like, if you go to like places like, you know,
Silk Road?
Yeah.
Where are you going with this?
if you go, you know, at times Facebook, you know, all the times, you know, they could be good at like socializing with family across like the continent. You know, Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, and 4chan, you know, places like
4chan.
those. You know, they have some positives, you know. 4chan, for example, for freedom of speech, you know. Facebook is socializing with people around the family members across the world or even across the country.
It does have pluses, but
And
it's,
there are some minuses, such as influx of racists on 4chan, because there's no regulations.
This is a
on what you
moderation
say.
thing.
Yeah, it's moderation. There needs to be moderators.
But-
And the bad thing about Facebook, you know, people just spend too much time. They make friends, you know, quotation
but it's
marks around the word
interrupting progress at schools and colleges and.
But
That's
not,
right.
but not in all cases. That's what the thing
friends.
is.
Like, we have iPads
But
at the school. and
What are the
even-
cases?
Well, this goes back to internal balance because you need to look into your mind and realize you need to be like, okay, yes, I can spend this time on Facebook, but only this much time, and that
Yeah,
might be
time
different for some people.
management would help this
Yeah,
generation.
because
a
some
lot.
people can like read really fast, so they can probably do their homework really quickly. They'll have more time for other things, and as long as they know that, they can pace out their day. People that are slower with doing things, they can still spend time on like social networks, on video games, but they have to realize that they still need to get their work done.
Can you guarantee that when you go home, that you're gonna take a break for an hour and then go over your time and then try and hurry up and do your homework?
I already
What's-
have- I
what's
already
about
have-
effort?
Are you
I already
gonna,
have a
are you
schedule.
gonna do your schedule?
I have
Or
a
can you,
I
are you
have a
gonna break
schedule
it?
like every day. I have an exact same schedule. Every single day, you know, you gotta go through the class step when I get home. After 8 hours of learning, I just want to relax, you know. At 6 o'clock every day, I start my homework. Only at 6 o'clock. I make that promise to myself every day. 2 hours, you get to relax. Do whatever you want. Watch TV, you know, go on my iPad, go on my computer, whatever I want. After that, do my homework. And then, you know, it's probably around 6:30 after I finish all my homework. You know, it's
But here, let me argue something, okay?
Hold on, what time do you guys go to bed? That's what I wanna know,
9
cause,
to 10.
Here, let me argue something. So when you
'cause
say,
it's a lot of homework.
I think you did that because you know for a fact that you didn't have such a schedule, like, I don't want to say monotone, but consistency, then you might get off track, you might start watching TV earlier, and then, you know, you might not do your homework later, but instead you have a nice set time, right?
So
but-
it's a loss of motivation
but-
caused from a loss of contingency?
but if-
I mean, that's not the word that you used.
A loss of, you know, motivation or a loss of a schedule. you
But
know.
yeah, but if I'm a righteous dude, at the end of the day, I feel like I'm gonna at any given time, I'm probably gonna go do my homework because I'm gonna feel not only guilty but don't not be an idiot or a nerd or whatever. But like if you know and you would do it, like there's no reason to exactly follow a schedule. That's only because I'm self-aware of exactly what would go down in the future if I were to do X thing or Y thing, right? Like if I were to play video games as soon as I get home from now, this podcast, right? I know that at some point that just makes me have to do homework at 10 p.m., right? I know that. But if some people want to push the limits, if some people don't know that, and they're like, well, that's always like 24 hours in a day. I can, do whatever I want, play video games for a nice 6 hours or something, right? And then all of a sudden, they don't have time to do the homework, and they end up doing it at lunch, putting one-word answers on paragraph responses. Then, I mean,
Well, then there's your reason right there.
right, but that's their case, right? That's what they chose. And then you might
That's
get,
why I was saying, sorry.
yeah, and then you might get people who are
Earlier.
like, technology sucks, like,
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Earlier I was saying you lose time, so,
Right.
exactly. You're playing a video game for 6 hours.
I don't
You
really
lose
play-
your time and that affects
well, that's their
your
choice.
school.
Back
Yes,
then,
that is
you
your
could argue the same
choice.
thing about like, if somebody decides to go outside for 7 hours, they don't do anything, they don't do their homework or whatever, then would you say going outside's bad? Like, it's going outside loses time. Like it's very dependable. Like you know,
Like, yeah, say someone is a workaholic,
right?
I work every day, every time. I work extra hours, because I want to. What about their family? Why don't they don't spend time with their family? If they work too much, you gotta find the balance, like the 8-hour balance. 8 hours of work, 8 hours of sleep, and 8 hours of whatever you want.
I know when I go home, I struggle with homework. It's either do the entire
You're
night
working
of
out, you're
homework.
trying.
I do my homework there. When I do my homework, it's a whole night ordeal.
Do you do it to do it, or do you do it because you have to
I
personally? Like,
I have to, and sometimes I do it just to do it.
is there enjoyment in homework? Like, Because
For
some-
AP, yeah.
because some people find
it's like-
some people find homework relaxing. If a thing, some people enjoy doing work.
Mhm.
Like Justin, like, what do you think about that?
I mean, I honestly, for the most part, don't like my homework.
Right.
But sometimes I do like it. Like if we're reading a good book in whether it be English or like a good primary source thing in AP US history, then I might like it. But for the most part, I don't exactly enjoy it.
Because then, but he might be. If somebody else was in this case, then he argue homework wastes time. Why do we have homework? Like they only go to class, right? Like that's an argument that can come up, and that's the weird thing, is that it's that some people could find enjoyment, and some people could think that if you think that technology is waste time, some people find that as a good use, maybe the best use of time. And then versus, obviously homework. There's always going to be that different sort of views, and that's what kind of sucks, in my opinion.
How about we stop?
I think we're getting to a good place where we can wrap things up. I mean, so it's really a thing of self-reliance. You got to know yourself before you can really make it anywhere. So, now in today's society, it's, some people might like conservative, they might see it as a bad thing, but there's a lot of safeguards in place, like welfare or teachers always trying to help you, your parents maybe getting you through things. There's all these safeguards, but you need to use them only as far as you have to.
And at times you can't trust them. You can't trust at times any of them.
And just know yourself, and as long as you know yourself, what you're capable of, and you push yourself to that level, and you're doing okay in life, that's pretty good.